Couple things. Every week that we win, we'll have Players of the Week. I think we released it a day or two ago, but in case anyone missed it, offensively we had co-Players of the Week in receiver Daniel Spencer and running back Ryan Jackson. Defensively, our Player of the Week was George Bamfo, and on special teams, the Player of the Week was Richie Leone, and he was also the American Athletic Conference Special Teams Player of the Week. Scout team Players of the Week, Scout defense was Tyler White, defensive back for us. Offense was Derek McLemore, a freshman receiver. And on special teams, Scout team Player of the Week was Cameron Daubenmeyer. Couple injury updates. Ralph Aragwu, I think it's public that he suffered a ACL injury and will miss the remainder of the season. And then Eric Island suffered a groin injury. He'll be out this week as well. It's good to get the first game under our belt, if you will, behind us. We had a chance to play a lot of young men in our program, and it's great teaching off this video. A lot of learning can be done, a lot of coaching can be done off the film. I thought our guys played extremely hard. I thought that on the field, and that was reinforced to me after watching the video. I think one thing that we did talk about as a team in the team meeting the next day was a lot of our starters played anywhere from 40 to 50 snaps, with the exception really being our offensive line. And traditionally, they're not going to get that many snaps. They could be in the 70s and 80s and sometimes 90s. So again, I really liked their effort, but it's a little more than half of a typical game that in terms of repetitions that they played. Penalties we talked about going into the game, and we had 14 for 126 yards. We actually offensively had an additional 100 yards negated from the plays that occurred and those being called back. So really, in my mind, 226 yards we lost due to those 14 penalties. It's something we're going to continue to work on and, again, coach off the video and continue to emphasize that's something that's important to winning football games. And I look to see not only improvement, but a vast improvement in that area this week. But again, I mentioned this after the game. It's the thing that relates most to winning football games, and that's turnovers. And we were able to get 4 turnovers, and offensively we were able to take care of the football and not turn it over. And being +4 in the turnover ratio is ultimately why we won that football game. Any questions?
Coach, you mentioned the other night, once you got a chance to look at the film, defensively, things that needed to be corrected as far as, because you didn't want your DB being in the tackle situation they were in the other night. I guess that's a point of emphasis this week in practice.
It will, and I give Southern credit, and certainly their game plan offensively was to really throw short passes. They were doing a nice job sprinting out. Zach McMillan, as we mentioned after the game, was one of our leading tacklers with 9. He was playing on the slot quite a bit, and again, they were throwing short passes, and he was coming up and tackling it. But yeah, we're facing a team here in Temple that's going to throw the ball all over the field as well. So we've got to shore up our pass defense, and that's going to be critical in Saturday's game.
Tony, speaking of Temple, what have you seen film-wise? Doing offensively, defensively, you guys have to look out for this point, or what you can tell the field.
What tell you about Temple?
Yeah.
Well, offensively, again, they're going to be no huddle. Coach Rule came out, I believe it was yesterday, and said they've got to be able to run the football. They didn't run it as much in terms of called runs against Notre Dame. Their quarterback, Connor Riley, does a nice job. He's got a tremendous arm, one of the best I've seen, and he rushed 12 times against Notre Dame, and he's some of those were designed. Quite a few were scrambles where he broke contain and moved the chains and got the first down. He's kind of a dual threat guy in that respect. They got a very, very physical offensive line. and they've got talented receivers. So again, it's quite different than what they did last year under the previous coaching staff. Again, they're going to be up-tempo. They really utilize a tight end, much more certainly than we do, and much more than you see a lot of hurry-up, no-huddle teams utilize. Defensively, they're aggressive. They certainly will blitz, and we expect to see that quite a bit. But I think it starts for them with their defensive line and their linebackers, and they'll disguise some things. Their safeties are very physical and aggressive, but it's they're gonna make you kind of earn every yard you get, if you will. We've got to do a nice job really on both sides of the football up front with our D-line and our offensive line. I think this game is one where when you look at how physical they are and the size of their lines on both sides of the ball, I've talked about it before, games are won, among other things, in the trenches there, and I think this will be one of them.
Let's talk a little bit about your linebacker play in the first week, having those guys, 2 new starters, and having them up behind the tackle list as opposed to the safeties this week.
Mm-hmm.
Probably something you guys are looking to have happen. Just talk about the youth there and how they perform with them.
Our linebackers did a great job, and Derek Matthews is as steady as they get. We'll look back at the end of the season, and Derek will be one of the top tacklers in the nation. But again, I mentioned 5 minutes ago, George Bamfo was our defensive player of the game, graded out the highest defensively for us. We actually had him with 9 tackles. I think officially the stats had him with 8 and a fumble recovery. And one of the things that has kind of been a stereotype, if you will, of George since he's been here is his effort, and his effort was phenomenal Friday night, and I was proud of him for that. And he's a young man too in our program that's came in, redshirted, played special teams, kind of waited his turn, continued to improve, and now he's got his opportunity, and he's certainly making the most of it. And then at the other linebacker position, Ephraim Oliphant's a guy who's had an interesting career here. Came in, played as a true freshman, then I think he was injured and missed a season, and then he gained some weight, moved to defensive end, and I want to say in the spring he might have been 3rd string. And between spring practice, what he did over the summer on his own, and his playmaking in the scrimmages, really in August, he moved up to become the starter at the Sam linebacker and had an excellent game. He's been very, very productive, which is obviously what you look for, guys that make tackles and assist on tackles. And then when he came out, we brought in the redshirt freshman, Stephen Taylor, and Stephen did a great job, was always around the football. So I was happy with how they played. Coach Hargraves is doing an excellent job coaching that group right now in some techniques that he's really emphasizing. We talked about as a staff, really showed up on the video from Friday night.
Coach, I know you said that you weren't going to reveal the strategy as for the quarterback next week, but my question is just, could you see yourself going the entire year with a 2-quarterback system? Would you be comfortable with that?
I don't really know. It's a good question. I don't know if I'd be comfortable with it or not. I'll tell you at the end of the year.
Could you talk about the production that your running backs had? I know you already mentioned it, but what do you think the breakdown in carries will be different next week? Or?
Well, it was, I came off the field Friday night, and if somebody would have asked me before I saw the stats, how many carries did Ryan have and how many carries did Farrow have, I would have thought they would have been equal. And I think my memory won't serve me exactly on this. I know Ryan had, I think he had 10 or 12 carries, and I want to say Farrow had closer to 20. And then Ryan had 120 yards, and I think Farrow came up 3 yards short of 100 yards. I think he had 97. So, it's a little bit situational in terms of if we're trying to get maybe Ryan out in space, if it's a 3rd and short, 2nd and short, who can get us 2 or 3 yards. But again, we feel like those 2 are both starters for us, and we're gonna have packages where it's one running back in the game, and we don't really care most of the time which one it is unless it's a designed play for one of the 2. We've got packages where there's one of those 2 in the game with Luke Stice or Tyler McCloskey at what we're calling fullback, and then we'll have packages where they're both in the game. So again, they're both starters. We don't flinch or hesitate, whichever one's getting the football. I think plays at times are overrated. I think players make plays, so if one of them's getting a hot hand, we'll certainly continue to feed him the football. And I think Justin Hicks came in and did a nice job, as did Randall Holloman. So we're continue to bring those guys along. It's a long season, but again, we've got the utmost confidence in our running backs right now.
And do you think Ty will be ready to start next week, Ty Cloud?
Hopefully he practices today, Ty Cloud. Hopefully he practices today. I'll know more the next day or two. Yeah.
Tony, back on the island injury, in preseason you had talked about him and Trevor both being able to do that job, but can you specifically address any changes with that in terms of what both of them can do, and then having Bowser back there as well? No,
and that's what's nice about it. I shouldn't say nice. It's not nice that Eric Island certainly got injured, but we've got depth at that position with the emergence of Tyus Bowser as a true freshman, and then Trevor Harris being here since January, again, has put on weight. He's night and day from when he got here. This is, I think, his third year playing football. Then he was a high school wide receiver as a senior in his only year of playing high school football. So he's getting better and better every week. He forced a fumble in the game, and he blocked an extra point. So that production there, those are two big plays that probably went unnoticed a little bit publicly from a guy who hasn't played football for 1,000 days. But we still have some depth in terms of Trevor and Tyus. They both got plenty of reps in the game Friday night, and those two will really man that position moving forward, if you will, until Eric returns from the injury.
Is Eric kind of a week-to-week, or do you look at it like it'll be long-term, or is it hard to say?
I'm going to say week-to-week at this point, only because probably best-case scenario is he's back for the Rice game. And I say week-to-week because next week we got the bye week. Yeah.
And also, as far as maybe the novelty standpoint for fans, this is going to be your first game in a new conference. I think you're playing the first game all together for the conference. Can you kind of just address the fact that you guys are first up, and it's going to be kind of a new look, new conference for you guys beginning this week?
I'll answer the question. I had a couple people talk to me or pull me aside. Hey, you ought to mention that to the team. And I don't know if that's something. I don't want to say it's a big deal. It certainly is a big deal. It's an extraordinarily big deal for our program. But it's not something that I'm going to get up in front of the team and say, remember, guys, we're playing in the first ever American Athletic Conference football game. So it's the next game as far as our preparation is concerned. We're excited to get on this big plane on Friday and fly up to Philadelphia and play in Lincoln Financial. It's going to be a great venue, great atmosphere there. And it certainly is. I don't want to downplay it either. It's certainly a major game for our program, but within our program right now, we're talking about what we have to do to beat Temple, and that's kind of the approach we're taking.
Is there a big difference, Tony, just from when you looked at all the teams that you're going to play them all? Some conferences you only play certain. Is there a big difference in style than what you guys were used to? Conference USA?
I'm glad you asked that, actually, because there's a major difference in style from the American to Conference USA in style, not only of offenses that we're seeing, but defenses that we're seeing, and even in the kicking game, which probably some people would take for granted, but it's a different style in all three phases. The other thing, which I was, again, thinking about this morning, is from top to bottom in this league, there's not a whole lot of difference. And, the teams that make mistakes and beat themselves on Saturdays are the ones that probably are going to end up losing football games. So, but again, the style of play is quite different than what we've seen, but it's been something that we've been preparing for here, knowing that we're making a move.
So like with your offense, I guess some of these teams have historically been defensive, the defensive style is a little bit different from CUSA. Bringing in your type of offense, I know a lot of schools are going with that. These days are trying to implement some form of. Is that an advantage to you guys that you have something like that maybe they're not used to?
I think it is, and I think again, when you talk about it, and I don't disagree with you that the defenses are different, but the offenses are different too. You're seeing, and I mentioned this, I think maybe a month ago at the media day, where teams traditionally in this conference have been 2 back, 1 tight end, run power, run ISO, run the football, huddle up, and bring our brand in. And a couple other schools now, as you mentioned, have either entered the league or have changed philosophies like what Temple's doing offensively. So I think you're seeing a little bit of that new, but again, it's completely different from where the last few years at Conference USA, it seemed like week in and week out we're playing a team that puts up extraordinary numbers on offense, doesn't huddle, and throws the ball over the field.
Coach, McDuffie wasn't able to, get a lot of catches like he, was able to do last. Do you have a plan to get him involved more in the offense next week?
Well, and I said this early in my post-game press conference, Chris, but again, we'll kind of take what the defense gives us. So, we had the running game going, so we fed Ryan Jackson and Farrow. You all right? Nice to see you on time today. And then Greenberry and Daniel Spencer certainly got their catches. Xavier Maxwell had some opportunities. And again, for whatever reason, Larry, I think, had 2 short catches, and that could always change. Again, we may go into this game, and I don't know right now, I can't say for certain what Temple's game plan. Maybe they're coming and they say, hey, we're going to take away the 2 inside receivers to beat Houston, and then Larry and Xavier Maxwell become more open, and they get more balls thrown to them. Maybe they're going to take away the running game. So it's kind of our offense. We have a game plan going in every week, and then we want to see, because it goes back to a little bit what Joseph said, how is the defense, what's their game plan going to be against our offense, and then we'll adjust from there.
Any quick update on Markeith Ambles? Has begun practice yet?
We anticipate Markeith practicing today.
Tony, I think you had mentioned this when you unveiled the uniforms before camp, in terms of, I guess, specifically defense. When you brought in Coach Gibbs and you were discussing, I guess, the defensive setup for this year, it was geared towards the conference as well. You just kind of talk about, I know we talked about offensively, but defensively, what you guys may have done with the new conference in mind? Or was it based on more personnel and what fits you guys?
Well, and that's how I was going to answer, which is probably not the answer you're looking for. But we needed to get. I think we're plenty fast, and certainly we'll always try to recruit speed. But we needed some strength and some size. So that's we addressed that in our strength and conditioning program and in recruiting. So when you look out there. Again, I use Joey Embu as an example, even though he came to our program prior to this move in conferences, but a 6'3", 310 to 15-pound nose guard. Tommy Marks improved in size. B.J. Singleton is 6'4", 285, 290. So we're trying to get bigger guys, and part of that too, when you look at Derek Matthews, again, his move to the middle linebacker position was predicated by this as well, but his going from 197 pounds to 216 was a must as well for us to enter this league and compete defensively.